My name is Sekiat from Merdeka Center. Today I'm going to present the Liberalism survey that we actually start tracking these studies since 2016. So probably I won't be told that I only got 15 minutes to do a presentation, but I got more than 30 slides. So I try to go precise and focus on the latest trend. Okay, this survey actually we break into three parts. We have political. One is a general about understanding about liberalism. Second is about political segment. Second is about social, and the final one is on economics. But in short, on this on the political, in general, we have an issue of understanding about this term liberalism in Malaysia, and mostly due to from the different belief background where some of the Muslim Putra will have more negative connotations views about the term, where in contrast to the textbook understanding that we have, while the non-Malay, non-Muslim will slightly more acceptable to that. I will go into detail that. Then on the political side, generally the country view that we have a good response to the question, except for some question about the seditions. And secondly, is about this social liberalism. Again, it divides along the region line, so we shall go highlight in some of the difference later. Number third one is about the economics liberalism. Well, we are so-called a better developed country among the third world, but then again, our country more very much into the pragmatism, where maybe later the panel can discuss more about that. Okay, first, this is standard, our methodology slides. I won't spend so much time on that. 1,002 sample size, 18 years old and above, across Borneo, Sabah, Sarawak is a representative of the country. Then this is all the detail about the income, the age groups, occupation background, all these things. Okay, first slide about understanding. We asked the respondent, do you heard about the term liberalism? Slightly more than half of the respondents claimed they heard about it, and then we also asked then the next question we asked about that. So the interesting thing, you can notice that when we started in 2016, only half the people understand, but there's a spike in 2018. I must explain why that is the scenario, because if you remember, in 2018, December 8, there's an anti-ISIL rally in KL here, against mobilized by the Conservative Party and the NGO. So suddenly a lot of people discuss about this liberalism, but sorry that it's more in a more negative way rather than the more positive way. But after that, 2019 and onwards, and when we doing the survey in December, quarter 4 of the year, December, then people say, only half the people say they know about that, they heard about the term. So again, you can see the different demographic backgrounds, where you can see that those Malay respondent, sorry, the slide may be a bit busy for those people at the back. The Malay respondent, almost like 60% claim they heard about the word. But for the non-Malay, almost half the respondents say they didn't heard about it. So, including respondent from Sabah Sarawak, Muslim Putra, non-Muslim Putra, they also, less than half heard about the term. So again, you can see the difference between the age groups and all this occupation background. Then we asked about a question, whether you heard about it or whether you understand, how much you understand. So it's quite consistent over the year that less than a quarter the respondent, they claim they understand about the term of liberalism. So we asked what they understand about it. This is some of the reasons being given. Some of it maybe is correct, some maybe is not accurate, but you can see that less than half of the people give some answer. Like only 42% of the respondents give some answer, whether it's correctly related to the term or not. But again, you can see that the Muslim, only 37% give an answer, where compared to non-Muslim, where about 54% give answer. So these are some of the answers. These are open-ended answers. We categorize in all different things. Then the question that will be interesting is that we ask, is liberalism good for the country? Then again, you can see that a lot of people don't answer the question. So when we started in 2016, half the respondents didn't give answer. 32 say, oh, good, and 30 say yes, good for the country, 22 say not good. But more than almost half say they don't know it's good or bad for the country. But again, you see 2018, there's a spike, suddenly say, oh, that's not good, 39, which relate to our social event that happened in 2018. Then we continue the study over the year, then you can see that increasing more and more people say that liberalism is not good for the country. And especially after the pandemic, where people spend more time on internet, there's maybe probably like Trisha mentioned, some of the things, fake news or some of these things. We need to look into it. So again, you can see the communal divide where the Malay, the first bar, red color, you can see that a lot overwhelming saying liberalism is not good for the country, where the non-Muslim slightly more positive, but still a lot of people didn't answer that. So these are the things that we need to can further discuss. Then we ask why you say it's good, why you say it's bad. And again, you can see that we just highlight that on those so-called it's a bad concept of country. Why? So 15% say it's against Islam. So this is something we maybe need to discuss why there's this kind of bad conceptions about liberalism among the Muslim faiths and so on. Some would say it's a negative impact on the region, and the other like too much of freedom or stuff like that. Okay, then I go straight to the first sector about political liberalism. We have four questions here, and some of it, like we asked about the, sorry, I can't see the slides. I have to move a little bit to centrate here. Okay, so we asked about four pillars. One is about free and fair elections. Overwhelming, 79% of people say it's good for the country. Second one is the rule of law, it being upheld, and 92% for year 2021 survey is overwhelming positive. Okay, then again, we asked about is Malaysia ready for freedom of speech, 77%, slightly below the question on the election and also rule of law. But then we asked about a question about whether the government should keep the sedition law. When we started in 2016, only 60% of the respondents say yes, we should keep the sedition law. And again, there are some community divide. But over the year, actually after the pandemic, during the pandemic, this thing getting more and more people support across communal, right? Where Malay, Indian, Chinese, the Sabahan, Sarawakian all support the sedition law. So the question now is what is a sedition law? And people are very worried about this kind of stepping on the sensitive issue, like the race and religion issue over the year. So maybe we should discuss maybe the anti-hate speech is better for the future for the country, or is assessing the current things will be the good one. We can discuss more. Okay, this is all the detail. Election, democracy, free speech, overwhelming. All the communities same, equal right before the law. Then the sedition law, you also see that are overwhelming that people want it, even the Chinese and Indians. Next question is about the social liberalism, where again, this will be I want to highlight the two slides will be again divide among the communal right. First thing is we ask about whether it's able to freely choose the way of my life. And non-Muslim overwhelmingly say, yeah, I can choose the way of my life, whether sexuality, religions, and a lot of other things. But again, the Malay respondent will be more conservative, and slightly more than 57 of the respondents say disagree. Okay, you can't, individual cannot freely choose the way of their life. But we got 40% agree. When we compare to the movie Putra from Sabah Sarawak, well, they also in the more positive compared to the counterparts here in the Semenanjung side. Then the next question about I have the right to impose my way of life on others. And again, you see the Chinese and Indian are overwhelming agree, say I cannot impose my value of life on other guy, on other person. But The majority of the population was saying, that why 59% disagree, means that they say they can comment on some other people's way of life kind of thing. So this is again the communal divides on the topics. And okay, this issue, freedom to be limited to respond to not harming others, generally everyone agreed, including Sabah Sarawak responded. And this is also kind of interesting because we asked whether the government should control the citizen value or culture or this tradition. And again, overwhelming people of the respondents also agree on this. So increasing over the year. Okay, this is my last part. Hopefully I'm still on time. Okay, five more minutes. So this is the part that I mentioned in the introduction. Overall, the country is still very much into the protectionism things. We have 3 questions for this segment. First, whether that we ask about the view about the GLC, whether the government should participate in the economics or private enterprise. Then again, you see over the year, the frustrating from 45% people say, okay, we should, they support the GLC in the economic, but over the year, but then only on the year 2018, then the frustrations, sometimes they support, sometimes they didn't support. So these all closely related to our socio-economic situation of the year, when people, how they view, if let's say that there's some issue reporting about our GLC, then the support number will come down. Then when it's a good day, good economic day, then the support will went up again a bit. Then this is all the detail, but again there's some community, but it's community different. Half of the Malay respondents supports, well, the Chinese in the stereotyping that mostly in the private sector will be disagree, but still got strong 31% of people support that. The role of the GLC state the price in our economics. Okay, this is about question about subsidy. Well, Malaysians like subsidy, so I don't know. Everyone likes subsidy, so you can see that every community, every age group, every income sector, even the high income people earns household incomes more than 6,000. Also say they support the government control and provision of the subsidy. So well, our economy is so distorted. How can Malaysia compete in the regions, in the ASEAN region, and also the post-pandemic? So this is also something we can discuss more about it. We are like subsidy. Okay, this is also the interesting question. We asked the question whether the government should be doing more welfare assistance to all the needy people. Overwhelming 97% of people will agree across every social segment. I think this also showed during our pandemics when there's a lot of these self-help NGO or community-based people, and they help and also get some of these government-assisted food basket, all these things distributed to the needed people. I think during the pandemic also there's a lot of suffering, but I think the society also show that actually we are quite in the good hearts in helping those needy people, while the respondent expecting more role function played by the government. Okay, just in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tan Seng Kiat, for the presentation. With that, I would like to invite our speakers to the stage for the panel discussion on the Liberalism Survey. Please welcome on stage Dr. Trishayo, Ibrahim Sufyan, Edin Koo, together with our moderator today, Sharat Kutan. Mr. Sharat, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sharad. I'm here with our distinguished panel. And we're going to begin with Ben, partly because Ben can extend the analysis of the results. And then we're going to go to Trisha. And lastly, we'll have Edin comment. But we hope really to have a conversation over the next 45 minutes, I believe. I just wanted to say that if the internet can be believed, in April last year, you had, Trisha, another survey, a similar survey, didn't you? And a discussion. That's right. And on the panel, Trisha, you were there, but you also had the Kanga MP, Amin Ahmad, and also ABIN President, Muhammad Faisal. Very interesting, because if you look at the discussions from a year ago, what were the focus points there? What were the concerns about both the survey and also what it showed? So Amin raised issues of language. Faisal spoke about the failure to define the ideology of liberalism. And the choice, I think, of guests, quite interesting a year ago. No doubt, your present guest, and I'm going to begin with Ben. Ben's the perfect person to speak about these trends. So, Ben, should we be concerned?
Thanks, Jared, and thank you everybody for making the time this morning. This survey that we've carried out since 2016, I think there are three main takeaway points. Number one is that as an ideology or as a concept, most Malaysians do not really have a very clear idea of what liberalism means. And over the years, that concept has been challenged, has been stolen by certain segments, demagogues in society, to simply not even to give a caricature of what it is, what it really isn't. And this is partly hinging on the kind of contestation that we see on a daily basis in Malaysian society. The question of identity politics and the mobilization of issues of religion and faith in order to gain political support. And this has been the unending battle for the political soul of the Malay population in this country. And that's why the concept of liberalism, as we understand it, has become a casualty. So that's number one. Number two, in terms of the more operative or the functional aspects of liberalism, as has been displayed in the survey, the economic aspects, the political aspects, as well as the social aspects, we see that it is not all bad. By and large, Malaysians generally appreciate, want more democracy in our society. It's just how democracy is perceived and whether or not it delivers the economic goods that I think there's contention within the Malaysian public. So people want free and fair elections. People want the freedom to express themselves within the bounds of responsibility. But at the same time, we do have issues and long-standing issues about inter-ethnic relations, the need to maintain peace and harmony in society that prevents them from embracing full freedom of speech. And that we see in the continuing strong support for restrictive laws such as the Sedition Act. In part, it's also because some of the actors in society has not really, done their roles responsibly. A lot of people turn to the cheapest, easiest way to gain support, and that is by inflaming people on race or religious or sometimes regional grounds. And I think the third area is very important because it is the lived experiences of ordinary Malaysians, and it hinges on the economic aspect of liberalism. as what Cynthia has presented earlier, most Malaysians, want to see continued government support. They want to see a large government. And in part, it is a continuation or is rooted in the way society and the political history of this place. The government has always had a very outsized role. The private sector is seen as an agent of national development, and this has been, I think, the case since 1974, and continues to be presented as such, although I think the realities now have changed in the sense that most of this are representing the personal or the specific segment interests of the people in business and people in power. So, and so I think at the edge of it all, after we look at the survey and what it means, is that there is a growing gap between within society in the sense of what they perceive things ought to be and what they are really experiencing. And I think the area where proponents of reform and liberalism can really take advantage is in the area of talking to people about the pragmatic aspects of good governance, of economic justice, of democratic principles. In the sense that has the system that we have here in Malaysia delivered the goods? Why has it not done so? What's wrong with it, and how can we as a society fix it? So, very long answer to your short question.
There's more coming. Since you have the mic, if I could just extend your intervention a little bit by asking you a little about the whole process of putting this poll together, because it might seem to some people that the kinds of questions that you have tested the populace for are rather big questions. They're deep questions that require the kind of context that you give. It requires a kind of fleshing out. I mean, even the question of big government, right? Unless you already have a discourse about government crowding out private enterprise or stifling individual initiative, some people might read big government as being the protective, redistributive, regulatory functions of government and say, well, that's a good thing. So is there an essential flaw in kind of trying to take a measure of public sentiment using polls, which, as you probably well know, is limited? I mean, it's potentially productive, it's also very limited.
Right, I mean, there are certainly limitations in polls, because in a poll there's limited real estate space on that piece of paper or the tablet in terms of the number of questions that you can ask. And so when we say people favor big government, it's a conclusion that we draw, because in the questions that we pose to respondents, we ask them whether they want to see continued government intervention in the business sector to ensure that what businesses do is aligned with the so-called public interest, whether they want to see continued subsidies and things like that. And so we conclude that people want a strong government hand steering the economy, and that has been part and parcel. And what we have found in this particular survey also dovetails with the surveys that we've done for other studies. And I encourage the participants here, particularly students in social and political science, to also take a peek at the Asian Barometer survey that we take part. And it's an interesting study because it compares 15 different East Asian countries. And so you can see how Malaysians compare to Indonesia and Thailand and the East, other countries like Taiwan, Korea, Japan, China. So you can see how the different aspects of economic principles are at work. And so some of the questions that we have put in this survey is sort of derived from standard measures. So these are not perfect, but I think it gives an indicator of what the public wants and how they perceive things.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben. You're not off the hook yet. We'll come back to you. But let's go to Tricia as the person who runs an organization that wants to both promote liberalism, but also take a measure of it in terms of where the country's going. Could you explain to us why it is necessary and how you think of the survey? Is this a baseline? Is it something you accept as a basis for strategies going forward, and so on and so forth?
Thanks, Gerard, for being here, and thanks Ben and Merdeka Center for being so persistent in doing this survey year after year, even though some of the results, especially the most recent ones, seem quite dismal. So I think when we conceptualized it, you're right in that we did want to have a measure of whether our efforts, perhaps not ideas alone, but collective efforts of everyone who's working on liberalism, on liberal democracy, have we actually succeeded in any way. Thanks. Yeah, so as to whether it drives the strategy moving forward, I think it does to one extent, but I'm also very cognizant of what you said earlier, that polls have their flaws. And we also have to accept that there are groups out there, intentionally or unintentionally, that also have within them their own political incentives to disparage the term liberal for whatever reasons, right? So with these ongoing efforts out there, and I think that's not captured, I mean, by the survey or anything else, I think, just qualitatively speaking, I think it's important to recognize that there are those forces there for whatever political reasons are doing that as well. But it does mean that there is this even more urgent effort, because as you all saw in the survey, the response to the term liberalism and the response to the individual elements thereafter, they actually differ quite significantly. So you can see this big demarcation between no support for the term liberalism, because perhaps, again, year after year we say the same thing. There's a failure to define the term accurately, or a failure to educate people as to what the term actually means, especially historically speaking. But there is appreciation for the individual statements. So everyone wants political freedoms. They do want the freedoms of speech and so on, that actually the term liberalism actually is supposed to encapsulate. So I think that's just one point to remember as we think about our strategies, right? That yes, the work has been successful in some sense. 2022 is so different from even 10 or 20 years ago. You see a lot more young people speaking out. I don't think only 18 would have been possible, say even 10 or remote 15 years ago. So I think that's just one thing to be hopeful for. The second thing I want to say is that I think I would like to narrow it down to the economic issues, and I know we have a panel later on the economy, but I think why is it even more important now more than ever in a post-pandemic situation to continue talking about economic freedoms and economic liberalism? Because I mean, we saw in the survey that everyone likes subsidies, but subsidies in the long run are actually not good for the economy, and people don't know enough of that, because subsidies means that the government actually is spending more of what it should be able to spend, which the richer segment of society are actually benefiting from, instead of being able to distribute the existing funds to the poorer segments of society. So it's a very highly inefficient tool, right? And so I think this continued education is really important. More and more, and I alluded to this in my speech earlier, if people want to see the presence of big government in the lives of controlling the economy, I mean, really, this is going to be, we say bad for business, and I think sometimes the term business is given bad flag, a bad reputation. Business just means SMEs. Business just means, the ability to trade, to do enterprise, and all of us are actually in one way or another connected to that. Business are like your Shopee vendors or your Lazada vendors, all of these small, tiny businesses, homegrown, right? Those are the ones that we want to see flourishing, and essentially greater dependency on government to control the economy. Actually, that's what we have in mind. When we say eventually bad for business, it would be those small vendors that would be affected. So I think, yeah, again, re-educating the public about the terms that we use probably is really important. Thank you.
Trisha, if I could just tap you with something that you pointed out, that the very question of this conference, as it was, does liberalism provide an answer to instability? And that, by that I guess you mean the political instability that we've experienced over the last 4 years. But will the, as it were, answer to that question be different if we talk about economic growth, we talk about addressing inequality and so on and so forth? And is political instability the most important question that Malaysia faces today?
I think when we conceptualized the conference, it wasn't just political instability that we were thinking of, and it's definitely not just Malaysia, right? I think the feelings that we have actually are related to regional, in fact, even global instability. I think all of us know that we're affected one way or another by the war, which, as I said in the speech, is projected to be a long-term one, at least 1 or if not 2 years from now. So there is this sense of instability, I think, that is resonant, not just in Malaysia, but for everyone around the world. And we're just reeling from the pandemic. We don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, let's not even talk about the climate crisis that's about to come. So I think the question was a little bit playful, because you're right in that should stability be the be-all and end-all goal? Because if that is the case, and I also said that in the speech, then we get to a situation of this this novel that I was reading, and I think a lot of science fiction, dystopic fiction has painted those pictures for us. We know what it means if stability is to be the end goal in everything that we do, and policies steered towards stability alone cannot be the answer. Because if you sacrifice freedoms for the sake of stability, what kind of society are we going to see? And I think that's really what we need to contend with. What kind of stabilities are we willing to experience, while also being able to have a lived experience that can still respect liberty, respect freedoms, respect the individual for all the beautiful things that the individual can be and that can represent. So I don't know if I answered your question actually.
No, it's very good. And we're going to open the discussion to the floor after we speak to Edin. But yeah, I mean, nowhere in this discussion so far we talked about the climate crisis and whether the market can resolve issues around the climate crisis, which I think is probably one of the biggest questions for us, since it can upend any grand design for economic reform, political reform, and such, right? So, just ready yourself to ask questions. I believe mic will be passed around very soon. But now we have the country's favorite gadfly, Tunku, to throw a wrench into the works and get us all thinking. Edin.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. A couple of things as I observed the survey. I think I'm very reassured that the politics of conviction doesn't really exist in our country. So it's full of colored paradoxes, which makes me feel extremely safe. Especially these days, in this age of very hard convictions on all sides that end up in a very nonsensical place. There's a lot of room, I think, to maneuver around here. Ben and Trisha and I have had this long quarrel. It's a very pretty quarrel, it's not never ugly. But I think there's a tendency now in Malaysia to be very over-dependent on surveys and statistics. We are a highly survey and statistic-driven society. We are also a society that imagines every step forward to be one that is rooted in legislation. That is also something that seriously troubles me. And nowhere here have we heard in this preliminary conversation, and this is where I'm always chastised, I suppose, for being a bit of a romantic, and what was the word you used? Gadfly. Is our inability in answering very contemporary questions to remember. So what are our historical moorings? And what is our capacity and ability to philosophize in our society? This is not so much to say that what Ben Trisha do are irrelevant, hardly, very, very important. I think it's a blame for people like me and Sharad who are a bit lazy, never deliver, and in the fields of journalism, and so many other things. In the field of writing, so much needs to be explored so that they do their work and then we test it. Nowhere also has it been said here that as a nation, we were conceptualized as a liberal nation. It is there in the preamble to our constitution. It is there in our Rukun Negara. And for some reason, or we know what the reasons are, too long to go into, it becomes a whole narrative, is the ability to hijack and exploit our entire historical legacy, so that you have now a society, as far as its historical moorings are concerned, a society that tends to fantasize all the time. Now there are positive things about this aspect of being sesat in our sejarah, kind of lost in our history, because there is a great eagerness for discovery and self-affirmation. A lot of that goes on, but a lot of people don't know where to go. Yeah. So, what does it mean to be a liberal society? This problem doesn't exist, of definitions, doesn't only exist in this realm, it exists in a lot of other realms. But we are not self-defining enough. Our ideas of what liberalism are, how they apply to us, are implanted, they're adopted, and I think the challenge upon imagining a nation around the concept of liberalism and liberty is that over the years we would attempt to grapple with what that means for us. In so many aspects of Malaysian life, I was joking with Sharad yesterday, and I said, I actually think I live in one of the most liberal societies in the world. I will have no fear walking into any space being the color that I am. In many other countries in the world, if you were black, you wouldn't go there. If you were white, you wouldn't go there. I lived this as a student, I know that very well. I think we are also failing ourselves in many ways in terms of addressing our problems, creating the necessary terminology for our problems. I'm a bit weary, for example, of people referring to Malaysian society with all its communal problems as an apartheid state. Right? Increasingly I hear that, and it comes from liberals, despairing liberals, panicked liberals all the time. I know of no place where you cannot sit next to a Malay or a Chinese in a bus, or where you live in ghettoized societies where you have no electricity and no water because you're black and have to shit in the drains. That doesn't happen here. And I think it's the poverty of our own imagination and our own interrogation as a result of not being close to the ground. Yeah, that we imagine all these things. There are serious and huge challenges to the idea of a liberal culture, but there are also deep strengths and deep roots already existing in our society upon which we can build. But we are creating neither the language, the vocabulary, the terminology for it, and instead despairing all the time about how much we are sliding down the road of authoritarianism, which is a bit strange considering we had something seismic happen in 2018, and that the greatest failure and what let us all down were the politicians and not the people who wanted to change. So we see the political process as a deep crisis. That's something I think we seriously need to have a conversation about how political parties operate, how they are able to contain or encourage, even kind of facilitate disagreement and contention within a party. I see lots of young, interesting politicians, very dynamic on the outside, but the moment they enter their party structures, become Baba Black Sheep, yes sir, no sir, three legs, food sir politicians. Now these are things that I think we need to address. The pandemic was also very interesting to me, and I see this talking about liberal spaces for 30 years, as you all know. I've worked in a very contentious space in Kelantan, trying to keep alive ritual traditions that are hugely kind of demonized and marginalized by very authoritarian forces. But I want to make it very clear that the work has gone on for 30 years very successfully because we are not the Taliban and we are not Iran, where I would be dead.
We are going there.
Maybe, but we also have to appreciate how we can create the spaces. And many of these authoritarian forces today may become increasingly authoritarian because they're also in very swampy space. So they're trying to hold on to their powers as much as possible. In a state like London, for example, it's amazing how young people turn to these banned things in very big numbers. I'm not saying that things are easy, but things have to be, you have to see these things for what they are and build upon them. So liberalism in so many ways is a threat, but we are naturally, I think, a liberal society. We have been that way.
Right, that's very interesting. I hope you're ready with your questions, but before I go to the floor, Kasim notwithstanding, no heckling, please. No, I'm just kidding. Edin, I want to ask you about this term that's been used actually now several times, which is hijack. The idea that somehow liberalism is a vehicle that has its own integrity and purity, and therefore it's been hijacked by people giving other meanings to it. But isn't it also true that we live in a country, our inaugural moment being liberal, as you I think rightly put, was always and continues to be deeply contested, and that what we see in conservatism is something that is a result of both historical forces, but also a response to rapid industrialization, rapid urbanization, modernization, forced modernization by elites. Isn't conservatism a genuine response, rather than just a cynical move, to modern Malaysian society?
Yeah, but I think our society has always been conservatively liberal. Liberally conservative. And that's the paradox. But these are things I think we need to identify. And you can only identify when you're there on the ground, you see. So many issues now that have actually been part of our organic nature. Very radical things. LGBT questions, for example. In Southeast Asia, we have been reconciled to this, actually created myths from this, and for centuries. But you don't see a movement being built upon this kind of indigenous knowledge. It's a movement that is built on edicts and rights, language that has no appeal on the ground. So we are very impoverished in that way. I think the distance between groups meeting here and what is actually going on the ground is very great. So there are lots of disconnects everywhere. It happens as well in our politics a lot.
So Edin, if I were to put you on the spot and come up with a different term for a free Asian or free Malaysian society, would it be liberally conservative or something else? I mean, if we're talking about, changing the narrative and not wanting to depend on this, whatever it's Western conceptualization of liberalism, how would we think about it? How can we
I'm not also
create
saying that you reject Western ideas or anything, but our ability to ingrain them, and then forge something out of them has been very weak. So if you ask me what kind of term I use, I don't know. I'm very lazy. I've not been interrogating enough. Sharad also. But I think we need to identify this. The pandemic was very interesting to me, all this kita jaga kita stuff, which I wouldn't underestimate at all as being anything sentimental. It really was a movement. It was a Gandhian moment, if you ask me, and it didn't just happen in Kuala Lumpur, it happened in many places around the country. And it showed that our social fabric actually is very, very strong. And it's something to be built on. It's how, it's, which is one thing recently that really unnerved me. I got a book recently published, Oral Histories on May 13th. 1969. Okay? I've been involved in so many of these different kinds of projects of collecting oral history, say on partition in India. On partition in India where it was how many millions of people over a span of period. Even in Indonesia, friends of ours have done a lot collecting oral histories. I was amazed at how biased this book was by a liberal. You would not think it was racial riots. You would think it was anti-Chinese pogrom. Right? So I don't know. I don't know how we envisage even our approaches, scholastic approaches to questions of this magnitude. We challenge seriously our ideas of a liberal society and a liberal social fabric.
Well, one thing that's quite clear is that more hardworking than Edith Koo, but also that maybe we lack a base, lack a common or a consensus on what kind of society Malaysia is. Because if you speak to somebody on the street, maybe they might say it was an anti-Chinese program, right? It is quite divided in terms of opinion and perspective. I'll put that, leave that as, and you can come back to that. But I do want to ask the floor. So there's a question there. There's a question over there. There are 2 hands so far. 3, 4.